The village of Meldreth lies in the flat, fertile farmlands of southern Cambridgeshire, 10 miles from the city of Cambridge and 3 miles from the market town of Royston in Hertfordshire. Famous for its green gages, fine apples and plums, the village has been a farming community since long before Doomsday. Meldreth Court was the home of the 17th century Romantic poet Andrew Marvell and later the residence of the 20th century China merchants, the Mortlock family. The Doomsday Book lists 8 watermills in the village, although only one survives today. The brewery has closed, and of the 6 public houses in the 1950s, only one remains today. The Warren in North End Meldreth was a holiday home to classical composer Ralph Vaughan Williams, where he stayed and collected local folk songs. The railway came in 1851, linking Meldreth to Cambridge in the north and London King's Cross in the south. It rapidly became an important trade and transport link, moving fruit, livestock, coal and coprolite. It was close by the railway line in 1880 that a working man made the discovery of the Bronze Age Meldreth hoard, hinting that there was a rich history hidden from view below the verdant fields. The Meldreth Local History Group was formed in 2007, and in the 6 short years since its conception it has unearthed much of Meldreth's recent history. It was in July 2012 that a presentation in Cambridge by Access Cambridge Archaeology in association with the BBC All Our Stories captured our imagination and raised the prospect of finding out about Meldreth's hidden past. Joan Gain and Catherine Betts made a successful pitch to former Time Team presenter and director of ACA, Dr Carenza Lewis, to carry out test pit digging in the village. Forms were filled out, an application made, and then, in November 2012, the news came in. Meldreth had been successful in their bid, and a Heritage Lottery Fund grant had been awarded to fund the exploration. On March 23, 2013, the project was launched, when Carenza Lewis addressed a packed Meldreth Village Hall.
What I'm going to talk about, as Jen said, is the project is going to be taking place in this village over the next few months. And the idea is that we will aim to get as many archaeological digs done in the village as possible, up to about 30. The idea is this is an opportunity to actually carry out your own excavations. Mostly these excavations take place in people's gardens, so it's a chance for you to find out about the history of the place you live in or the place you know, to get to have a big sort of community event that gets everyone together, get to know people better, meet new people often, and rewrite the history of the village.
Over 30 gardens were offered for excavation. The digs were to be carried out over one weekend in each of June, July and August 2013, with a number of the digs open to the public so as to allow as many people as possible to observe the activity. The History Group, along with Carenza, selected the most suitable dig areas. History Group member Tim Gain was sent on a training course to learn how to produce the digital record of the digs.
Hello, this is Tim Gain from the Meldreth Local History Group. I'm here today on the Media Trust All Our Stories training to learn how to use the video camera and to make the film of our archaeological dig.
In May, 19 History Group members and volunteers attended a training day at Cambridge University Archaeology Department in Downing Street, Cambridge, to learn how to dig the pits and identify the finds. Attendees also had the opportunity to visit the Archaeology Museum to see examples of items found in the Cambridge area.
So that's the 2 booklets that we'll provide you with copies of, and you'll have 1 copy of each for each test pit. The excavation record booklet is the one you will fill in, and that will be the permanent record of that excavation.
Stamping is probably one of the commonest forms of decoration you get on early Saxon pottery. Tends to be 6th century if it's stamped. You get a little bit of stamping in the 5th century, but most stamped pottery is 6th century.
Further training for the volunteers was given by Robert Skeen, and then, on the Saturday morning of the first dig weekend on June the 8th and 9th 2013, Carenza gave a brief reminder session of the documentation and test pit procedures. 10 test pit locations have been identified in the southern end of the village for this first weekend, with digs in Chiswick End, Whitecroft Road, Fieldgate, the High Street, Flambards and the British Queen. In spite of the overcast sky, enthusiasm and excitement was high as preparations were made for the start of the dig. First, a 1 metre area was marked out. The grass was lifted and the first context was dug out to a depth of 10 centimetres. Careful attention to detail was observed at all the pits, with step-by-step recording of the information in the booklets provided, as well as by camera and video. All the soil removed from the pits was sieved, and all the solid objects found were carefully washed and dried for examination by the archaeologists. 9 of the 10 pits were open to the public, and a steady stream of interested villagers visited the pits over the course of the weekend. All of the test pits yielded something of interest, although in some cases it was just Victorian or 20th century blue and white pottery. It was in the ancient moated area on Flambards Green that the most exciting find of the day was made, when what was thought to be a medieval pilgrim's badge was unearthed in the second context. This is the first time that such an object has been found in a test pit, and illustrates just what can be found in a tiny 1 metre square hole. Further finds from the same hole revealed an ancient amber bead and a bone and teeth from a wild boar, proving this area had been occupied for very many years. During the weekend, the finds were transported to Anne Hanscom's barn in the centre of the village, and it was here on the Sunday afternoon that archaeologist Dr Alex Pryor and all the test pit owners and volunteers gathered to view the finds and hear a little of what went on over the weekend.
And we hit on context 2, the pilgrim badge, so that was our best find, so we were really excited about that. Going down further, we did hit a massive bone, which we think was a boar, because we found 2 tusks for the boar's teeth, and quite a lot of the bone was still intact, so we took all that out. Further down we found a stone floor, and then on context 5 we found a bead which is in the glass case, which could be as early as Roman bead. We think it might be amber, but that was another exciting one. So yeah, we were really pleased.
First few contexts there was just bits of pottery, bone, and probably the oldest is medieval Anglo-Saxon around that era.
The second series of digs took place during the searing heat of July, with temperatures topping 30 degrees. A test pit at Meldreth Primary School was the first to be dug, starting on the Friday so that the school children would be able to take part. This they did with great excitement, and they were soon rewarded when a George II farthing was unearthed, as well as numerous fragments of pottery and bone. Several pupils from Melbourne Village College were also at this dig as they filmed the proceedings for their preparation of a film of the project. The second weekend of digs started in earnest the following morning, with pits located in Whitecroft Road, the Grange, the High Street and repeat pits at Fieldgate and Flambards Green. One test pit was dug in an orchard beside the railway line in the vicinity where it is thought that the Meldreth hoard was located over a century earlier. Sadly, there was no hoard unearthed this time, although pieces of pottery dating back to the Bronze Age were discovered, suggesting that the site was occupied at that time. Later pieces came from the Roman and medieval periods up to about the 14th century. Once again, most test pits yielded something of interest, although there was nothing on the scale of the pilgrim's badge unearthed during the previous digs. On the Sunday afternoon, all the excavators gathered in Anne and John Hanscom's garden to hear about the finds and, of course, to enjoy the tea and sumptuous cakes.
Ours was one of those test pits which looked like it was going to be Oh, yawn, another 10 centimetres until we got down to 60, when all of a sudden medieval pottery came out left, right and centre almost. At the top we had a beautiful example of a rusty coat hook, half a dozen nails, you know, all the usual sort of things. Then there's nothing, and then suddenly in context 6 there was the medieval, which went on.
It really does seem that you've got masses and masses of this high medieval material, this period 1100 to 1400, the sort of the great medieval economic boom years, if you like, do seem to have been good for Meldreth as far as we can see. You know, all of the pits are producing a lot of it. I don't think there was any pit that didn't produce more than 5 sherds of it.
Now, the other great find was a round coin with a square central hole in it, Chinese, from the How Much dynasty. I'm genuine, it is a Chinese coin. Yeah.
And what you've got there from that test pit in Flambards is a spindle well. And it's a particularly nice artefact, especially as that Flambards area, of course, produced the pilgrim badge that most of you, I'm sure, have seen photographs of last time. To now get a spindle well is really nice. They're sort of classic medieval artefact associated with women. Women spent most of their time sort of spinning at a time when you sort of, everything had to be, well, not exactly homemade, but you know, you can buy stuff ready-made in the shops quite as easily.
The following week, a test pit was dug in the grounds of Meldreth Manor School in an area behind the old manor house. Unfortunately, it quickly became clear that the area was made up mostly of rubble dumped during the reconstruction of the right-hand rear wing of the manor house. Our final 10 pits were dug in August, and once again we were blessed with superb weather. This time the pits were spread across the village from Whitecroft Road in the south, the Old Bell in the High Street, and 7 pits in North End, including Topcliffe Mill and Bury Farm. Once again all the pits yielded something of interest. 29 Whitecroft Road on the site of Hope Folly produced Bronze Age and Roman pottery, but the Old Bell in the High Street showed that the site had not been settled until much later, after the Norman conquest. It was in North End where the most significant finds were made. The sites clustered around the church produced large quantities of pottery across the whole date spectrum, from the Bronze Age right up to medieval. The pit in Gardener's Cottage, North End, produced burnt bone along with large fragments of pot, suggesting a dispersed urn cremation on the site. This pit was also the deepest at an impressive 1.4 metres. Natural was not reached and pottery was found at every level. It was at Topcliffe Mill that the most exciting find was made of this last weekend of digs. A metal arrowhead was discovered in the third context of the test pit dug close to the edge of the moat surrounding the old manor of Topcliffe. Copious amounts of pottery, bone and shell were also found at all levels. The pit at Bury Farm was dug on the site of Veese's Manor and yielded mostly building remains as well as medieval pottery. Once again, we all convened in Anne and John's back garden for tea on Sunday afternoon to examine the finds and share experiences.
Anyway, welcome everybody to the end of, I never thought we'd say that, of the 3rd Meldreth dig, and it's been fantastic. So give yourself a good big hand for that. Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of finds, but Kat said that it was good quality.
Yes.
And she said we had the neatest pit.
You told us that as well.
Didn't know that.
We got down to context 8, and we've got medieval bits and pieces out of every layer, out of every context. We're just starting on 9, and we're going to keep going because
we were digging on within a moated site that where a manor house had been situated, and we basically got medieval pottery out of every context. Our best find, I'm sure you all know by now, was the arrowhead, which came out of the 3rd context. And in that context, we found masses of stuff. I think about 40 pieces of bone, 50 pieces of pottery, about 60 pieces of shell.
But all the way down to context 6, there was a little bit of medieval pot coming out all the time. So clearly long-standing occupation there.
Yes, the button we found came from obviously the American Revolution that period, because looking on the internet it dates between 1715 and 1810 and was a tunic button, I understand. So whoever fought in the USA actually got back from there. How that button got into the pit is a wonderful story. But
the 32 test pits yielded approximately 200 bags of finds. These each had to be sorted into pottery, bone, flint, shell, metal and others, photographed and individually bagged. The resultant 800 plus bags were then sent to Cambridge University for identification and for a report to be written. On November the 24th, an exhibition was held in Meldreth Village Hall to celebrate the completion of the project and to show off the finds. Each of the 32 test pits had a separate display with a board showing its location, a short description and photographs of the dig. Pottery and bone from each context were displayed in a grid in front of the boards, along with a timeline illustrating the ages of the various finds. The more unusual finds were exhibited in separate display cases. In the centre of the hall were displays explaining the background to the finds, how to identify the pottery and bone, the use of wattle and daub in building, the history of pilgrim badges and hand mirrors, the use of shellfish for food, spindle whorls and flint tools. Other displays showed the distribution of pottery and bone finds, as well as the local archaeology and aerial photos of Meldreth. Meg Short and Pam Wright from Melbourne U3A also exhibited their research into the history of Flambard's Manor, which helped to explain the finds made in the digs on the green. This film, and one made by the students of Melbourne Village College, were shown alternately in the green room during the day. The highlight of the exhibition was a presentation by Carenza to a packed village hall, where she explained the relevance of the finds and compared Meldreth with other digs carried out across East Anglia. What was clear was the large number and high quality of the finds in Meldreth, placing us in the upper quartile for most of the ages of pottery, spanning 3,000 years from the Bronze Age through Roman, Anglo-Saxon, medieval up to Victorian.
There's a huge amount of material turned up. You can see again, and this is right up in the north of the village, Bronze Age pottery again, a couple of dozen sherds of that. I don't think we've ever had a test pit that's produced that much pottery. We've had entire counties where we've done 300 or 400 test pits that haven't produced that much pottery. Somebody did some statistical analysis and worked out that you are 25,000 times more likely to find Victorian pottery than Bronze Age. It's that uncommon. If you look at this, you've got one sherd of Victorian and a couple of dozen probably of the prehistoric. So again, something really special going on here. A little bit of Roman material, and then masses of this St. ware, this pottery. It sort of spans 9 to 1100, generally late Anglo-Saxon, going all the way down. We've clearly got an important late Anglo-Saxon site with masses of pottery turning like that.
Carenza also revealed that the pilgrim badge found on Flambard's Green was in fact the back of a small folding mirror. This was only the second of its type found in Britain.
And then we suddenly got a complete turnaround. She said she found a perfect match for it. And it's this. And you can see this comes from Billingsgate in London. It's the only other example that's exactly like this, but it is a perfect match. It's mould perfect. It has come out of the same mould.
And so this phase of the project is complete. Not surprisingly, this tiny snapshot on the ancient history of Meldreth has whetted our appetite to find out more. We were amazed at the huge amount of material that was unearthed in the 32 test pits, which covered just a minute portion of the village area. There is now talk of field walking and geophysical investigations. More villages have offered their gardens for test pits, and there is a possibility of digging in the fields outside the village envelope where Roman remains have been unearthed in the past. What is clear is that this has just been the start of an exciting journey which will take us back over 3,000 years to the early settlements in Meldreth. We are most grateful to the Heritage Lottery Fund for the grant to carry out our test pit project, as well as to Dr Carenza Lewis and her team at ACA for their expert help and guidance throughout the project. Thank you.